Hello, everybody, and welcome to Miss Chan's science videos. We are going to delve deep into the wonderful world that is biology. And for those of you out there over the internet, and if you happen to live in New South Wales, this is a very good way to revise your HSC Module 7. However, the content from the videos are also applicable to anyone who has a strong interest in biology or if you are curious about biology in general. Also, disclaimer that you should, if you are studying for HSC in New South Wales, make sure that you use our videos as supplementary only to the lessons provided by your classroom teachers. Without further ado, let's start. Module 7 is about infectious disease, and as you know, if you study HSC in New South Wales, that all of our modules are guided by an inquiry question. And we have 4 inquiry questions for this module, which we will start on the top left-hand side, which is about what causes infectious diseases and how are diseases transmitted. This is all the boring syllabus content, and there are some keywords that have been highlighted in bold. At the end of this topic, there is a Quizlet revision, and if you're interested, here is a link on the bottom that you can press on for the topic. However, we are not going to go through the entire syllabus in about 10 minutes. So we're going to only focus on number 1, what is a pathogen and the differences between micro, macro, and non-cellular pathogens. In the classroom, there's often an idea of the blackboard configuration. If you're not unfamiliar with this format, basically it shows you an overarching theme, some learning objectives that will achieve that big idea, and what can you do to help you to become successful. So at the end of today, you should be able to tell me that there are 6 major types of pathogens, and we're going to use a specific memory rhyme to that you can remember them, and also to tell me the differences between a macro and macroorganism, giving me examples of some. As you know that in biology, we always need to have and know and remember some examples. So let's get started. Infectious diseases. They are the magnificent world. I always find infectious diseases to be incredibly interesting because that is something that we can't actually physically see unless of course, that you get the disease. But what causes the disease often, majority of them are invisible to mankind. And if I had another 2 hours, I could talk to you all about infectious diseases. But today our goal is to just look at pathogens. Of course, before we look at pathogens, we have to understand that there are 2 types of diseases. One is infectious disease. Infectious diseases are diseases that are caused by pathogens that can be transmitted. So remember, pathogen is any type of organism or agent that can cause a disease. And if it can be transmitted from one person to another, then it is deemed to be infectious or communicable disease. So obviously, right now in our pandemic, COVID-19 is an infectious disease because it can be transmitted from person to person. Tuberculosis and common cold or flu. Typo. Number 2 is non-infectious disease, which is caused by genetics, factors, choices, for example, lifestyle choices like, for example, alcohol or smoking or any cellular malfunction, and that it cannot be transmitted from one person to another. For example, different types of cancers, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. So this cannot be transmitted from one person to another, hence the word non-infectious or non-communicable disease. Right, now that we know that there are 2 types of diseases, because we're going to be focusing on infectious disease, there are different types of pathogens. And I find that it always is very interesting if you make it something that relates to you. The mnemonics is always going to help you remember the different types of pathogens. So I come up with my own called my very best friend has 3 Ps. And in that order: virus, bacteria, fungi, protist, parasites, and prions. Right? It has to be in this specific order because up until parasites, this order is also happens to be the smaller size to the larger size. Um, so from V to the second P, so virus, bacteria, fungi, protists, parasites. And then, of course, we'll talk about the very special prions. All right, so virus. So what is a virus? We all know about virus from the coronavirus. Right? They are non-cellular. It is very small, 0.1 micrometers to 0.3 micrometers. How many micrometers are there in a millimeter? Think about that, guys. And it has a simple protein coat that covers its genetic material. Obviously, because it is non-cellular, it does require a living host for them to reproduce and does not survive outside a living host. Some say that it can live on surfaces, but for them to replicate and reproduce, it needs a living cell. Right? And so the families, to categorize them, because, as humans, we love categorizing things. Your folders, your stationery, any tools that you have. We categorize viruses by their shape, the type of genetic material present. For example, this means double-stranded RNA. This means single-stranded RNA, and how it is replicated. Right. Some common disease examples: we've got chickenpox, shingles, which happens to be the reactivation of the virus that causes chickenpox. People who get older, because chickenpox virus hides in immune privileged sites, right? And they hide in there, stays dormant until you get old and you have an immune deficiency, or that your immune system is not quite as active. Cold, rubella, COVID-19, etc. Right? As always, in biology, you should always try and remember two examples for each. Right? I often think of your personal vaccination history to help you remember any of the examples. So if you had cold or flu, if you had your flu vax every year, think about that. Think about your childhood vaccination. What did you have, and what was it? Obviously, not all of them are from viruses, and but it serves as a good starting point. Number 2, bacteria. Remember your very best friend, VMB. Coming up, bacteria, they are unicellular, prokaryotic, with a cell wall. Right? Unicellular, remember uni meaning one. You should know this if you are studying biology. Prokaryotic means that it does not have any membrane-bound organelles, which means that their genetic materials will be floating loosely without a membrane inside the cytoplasm. And to categorize bacteria, it's determined by its overall shape, just its overall shape, right? Unlike viruses. And so bacteria actually have quite a few interesting Latin origins that I find they're actually quite interesting. There's a whole microbiology department dedicated to studying different types of bacteria, and so if you would like to have a look, it is definitely quite interesting down there, but I will not go through the details. Disease example, for example, tuberculosis, TB for short, or people who love reading history books, you will know this as consumption. Pneumonia, diphtheria, typhoid, diseases that often can cause debilitating. They are quite debilitating in the ancient times, before the onset of before the discovery of antibiotics, of course. The penicillin families, and so it used to kill quite a lot of people across the world, and especially TB, since it is a very long. It can progress, and but with the onset of antibiotics, after the discovery of antibiotics, quite a lot of bacterial diseases have been eliminated. Of course, then you talk about, antibiotic resistant diseases, and that's a whole different story. All right. For the time being, remember that there are diseases, there are quite a lot of diseases. Remember two diseases that are caused by bacteria. Number three, my very best friend, F for fungi. Now, fungi is really interesting. Fungus. They can be either uni or multicellular, so either one cell or multiple cell, eukaryotic with a cell wall. And so the ones that are singular cell are often called yeast. The ones that are multiple cells, made from multiple cells, so more than one, are mushrooms and molds. So we often think of fungi as directly related to mushrooms, right? The ones that you eat, you put into a spaghetti bowl, the ones that pop up after the rain in your garden. They are actually multicellular fungi. They're not. There's also another whole family of fungi that we forget quite easily. Yeasts, right? So making bread, make alcohol. If you're old enough to drink alcohol, which I hope that you're not underage drinking. So there are two types of fungi, right? So how do they reproduce? So we classify them as either unicellular. They're just the main two types, right? And obviously within mushrooms there are different mushroom family groups. So how do they reproduce? Yeast reproduce by budding. So if you do study HSC biology, you should remember that there are methods of reproduction from a particular module. Okay. Now, if you feel that this is somewhere that you don't really remember what budding is, go back right now and pause this video and go check it out right now if you have forgotten what budding is. Okay. And B, so mushrooms is the multicellular fungi. They reproduce through the release of spores. So if you have forgotten methods of reproduction, go back and read it. Right now, revise before you continue. Right, disease examples, remember two. Candidiasis, so your yeast infection, often happen if you are on antibiotics or people who are taking immunosuppressants. Athlete's foot, Tinea pedis, and also ringworm, so Tinea corporus, which are not caused by worms. They are caused by fungi, but they make round shapes and rashes on your skin. All right, my very best friend has three P's. P, the first one, let's go, which is protist. Protists are unicellular, one cell, eukaryotic, with no cell wall. You can see that the sizes have gradually increased. Right. One's classified based on our known higher kingdoms, like your plants, animals, and fungi. But however, more recently, they're using DNA to look at to make a more accurate evolutionary relationship. But you can think about them as, if it is animal-like, we call them protozoans, right? If it's plant-like, we call them algae. Well, it's just, single-cell organism that you see floating around in really dirty water, and they're just swimming around underneath the microscope. What are they? They're most likely protists, right? And they're green, they're often algae, some type of algae. And if they eat other things, then they are protozoans. And so if they're fungi-like, they're often molds, so water or slime molds. Examples, malaria is a very, very, very prominent example for protists. Other ones are amoebic encephalitis, so the inflammation of the brain, and your sleeping sickness. Obviously, malaria is a huge issue. And back in the days when I was studying, which is a really long time ago, we actually didn't think that malaria vaccine was possible. But now we think that we may have found a malarial vaccine. And if you are interested in malaria as a disease and how it is treated and prevented, and the pathogenesis of malaria, it is actually very, very, very complicated because it involves the life stages. So this particular Paramecium lives in, no, not paramecium. This particular species lives in the mosquitoes, and it's a very complicated cycle. It's between mosquitoes and gets bred, and you guys can go look all about it, right? Parasites. So parasites. So there are multicellular and there are macroorganisms. So far we have been looking at microorganisms, so organisms that cannot be seen with a human eye. So macro means you can see them with a human eye, and you can see that the size is definitely large, much larger. Right, so we classify depending on where it actually lives. So where would it live? Where do you find it? So endo meaning to do with inside or within. So if it's found within the human body, it's endoparasites, or if it's found outside the body, it's ectoparasites. And I know that if you know biology, you know that there are quite a lot of prefixes that start with endo. So you know the prefix endo, you know that it is inside, right? Ecto meaning outside. Found outside the human body, so ticks and mites. Right, so if you think about parasites and the diseases that they cause, so tick bites, mite bites, lice disease, if you get infected with tapeworm, I will not suggest you to look it up. If you're afraid of, it can be a bit gross. Yes, I believe that there is a human disease museum in Sydney somewhere that has a whole collection of specimens with all the diseases. So I'm sure people have seen it. If you want to see it face to face, or you can just simply look it up. Right. So last P. So far our very best friend, right, has 3 peeves. We have gone through 2 peeves, and very best friend's 2 peeves have been increasing in size. We have left out the third P, specifically because prions are really special, right? Not only are they non-cellular, and have a look at this incredible small size, will you? 1 nanometer to 20 nanometers. Nanometers. Alright, so remember there are 1000 micrometers to 1 millimeter. Obviously, there are 1000 nanometers to 1 micrometer. So this is extremely small, right? That is because they are proteins, right? Remember, you have one of the big groups in your body. They are proteins and are misfolded, right? So remember that proteins require a specific structure to function. They need to be folded in the accurate way. Because they're misfolded, they can actually transmit this and make other proteins misfold and so cause disease. And Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD for short, is the very classic examples. And it literally would eat the brains out. So you will have holes in your brains as a result of this misfolded protein. And you also get mad cow disease, right? And so that is it. So you should be able to now know that the 6 types of pathogens. My very best friend has 3 P's. Very best friend, right? VBF and 3 P's. What are the 3 P's? And one is VBF. And if you feel like you're confident, make sure that go through a very quick quiz if you will like on the link below, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye for now, people on the internet.